We'll start with a couple questions, and then we'll go into the subject that I left off on last week with the thought witnessing experiment, or what happens as a result of really taking the stream of thought itself as the meditation object. All right, so if there's no questions, I'll just start. Yeah, and if a question comes up, you can just raise your hand or put it in the chat, and I'll get to it. So in last week's, I think it was last Wednesday's, or sorry, not last Wednesday, this past Wednesday, talked about the stages of awakening, going from, or shifting from the total personality focus to shifting to beingness, or shifting to identification as awareness, and then the deconstruction of awareness and the forms of awakening. They're often called no self and emptiness. So if you didn't catch that, I highly recommend that video. It's the most recent one on YouTube. So where we spend most of our time, and where I feel probably in relation to my teachings, the area that I address the least is the initial shift into awakening, or what some people would call a permanent shift, or the big shift, or a persistent shift. It's really that initial falling away of identification, and really having the sense that of a moment to moment lived experience of awakening, or at least the capacity for it to be moment to moment is there. Like your natural state, your baseline changes. Or that's the characteristic of it. It's one thing to be able to get into a special state of meditation, or to experience some kind of rarefied state of consciousness. That's not what we're talking about. In this case, we mean your fundamental baseline changes, shifts into a different gear. So if your fundamental baseline before awakening is total identification as a person, the first shift, generally speaking, would be your baseline shifting to a sense of being, a sense of beingness, or a realization of the witness. Let me switch the settings really quick. Do, 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 do. Yeah, so the shift from your baseline of I am my personality, or I am my thoughts and I am my feelings, I am my beliefs, I am, my decisions and my actions. This is the ordinary conventional perspective on identity. There's a shift from that into being. So now you're this presence, or now there's this awareness which knows those things. An awareness, presence, or a knowing, which is witnessing the personality, witnessing thought, witnessing feelings. So this is really the initial demarcation. And for some people, this shift is so significant, or can be so significant, that they give it names like unity consciousness, or realization of, or the realization of being, that jump from a personality to that which is observing the personality is seismic for some people. In my case, it was. So these initial openings to beingness, they dawn in meditation, or they can dawn naturally. You could just be out in the woods or something, or on a hike, and you have this sense of boundlessness and openness, and this freedom from thought, or this freedom from being bound to thought. And it's at this point that the practitioner really begins to experience mental stillness and silence for the first time, even if it's not, even if it's short-lived. It's notable. Eckhart Tolle calls it, the silence of being, or the the silence of the witness is another example. So it's really, you can even see it as like a shift from the left brain, logical thinking mind, into, this non-temporal, or this aspect of consciousness that isn't limited to time and to the narrative. So now for the first time you have a sense of observing or witnessing of the narrative. And anytime you do a witnessing type practice, like the exercise that I mentioned, where you're witnessing thought, or you're just observing everything that you're thinking, you begin to have more and more of this sense that you're not what you're thinking and feeling, you're that which knows it. And in the sense that knowing, this pure knowing, this pure awareness isn't subject to what is happening. It's not subject to thoughts and feelings. It's not the victim of thoughts and feelings, because it's not, you have the sense that it's not you. It's not your personality. Your personality, your I, your me, that's what suffers. But in this kind of awakening, you have a sense of a demarcation from that I and from that me. So in a way, there's a kind of separation, a gap or a distance from the suffering, which was so prevalent. And so this is why it's such um, an important first base, you could say. Um, many traditions or teachers, that's it, you know. When you realize the witness, you do enough witnessing and enough observing to get this sense of really get this sense of awareness that isn't tied to any conditions. That's it. It just that particular kind of awakening or that particular kind of shift deepens, and it creates a sufficient amount of freedom for you to really have the sense that your suffering is gone or it's just majorly reduced. Ramana Maharshi put it really well. He said, for example, the self with a capital S does not suffer. It does not suffer. It is not subject to sin. So that's what I mean by the witness. Uh, he also said, for example, that uh, awareness is another word for self with a capital S. Self is awareness. So this is really the first. I mean, if um, it's possible that it's possible to have a kind of awakening or a form of awakening that isn't to initially make a jump from uh, personality identification to some other kind of awakening that is not this self-witness thing that I'm talking about. That's definitely possible. Um, and is often the case, especially if you're a practitioner of Buddhism. So, but this is the really the um, quote, the first place to get to. It's the first uh, dawn of freedom, the first refuge from the incessant dramas and flow of thought and emotion. So, what are the initial techniques, or what are the initial approaches to enter um, to come into contact with the discover the witness would be the appropriate word. So in Ramana's case, he recommended self-inquiry. So that, in my terminology, in an approach is called mode 2. For those of you that are new and you want to see how I approach meditation, it's basically in two sectors. There's a video on the channel called 3-mode awareness. So it explains how all meditation techniques can be categorized into 3 types or 3 modes. The first mode is any technique that is object-based, where attention is directed outward. Mode 2 is when attention is directed inward at the um, at the mind itself. And mode 3 is when the direction of attention is abandoned completely. And mode 3 is always characterized by effortlessness and the abundance of contrivance. So you're not trying to do anything at that point. All Zen koans and inquiry methods are mode 2. So the attention is directed at subjectivity itself. Yeah, so it's a we can explore it now. Like what do I mean by this? What do I mean by awareness, right? What do I mean by this? So especially for those of you that aren't familiar with anatta or no self, all this um, stuff where the subject object split has collapsed. Uh, let's put that aside and let's just do the exercise for the sake of the exercise itself. So just notice um, first be aware. So now actually be aware. 5 seconds ago or 5 minutes ago, you weren't aware, probably. So now you're aware. You're actually noticing. So I want you to uh, just look at this noticer. Look at that which is aware, that which is noticing. That which is experiencing, if you have that sense. So you might have the sense that it's you that's experiencing. That's fine. So attend inward and just notice the most fundamental thing, which is when you relax and you let go, it's this awareness or this noticing that remains. This presence. And so we'll do an exercise briefly now where we're going to describe awareness. So to be specific, it means that in this exercise, you're not going to describe um, what is being thought or what is being felt. You're not going to describe the um, the changing nature of experience. You're just going to describe this awareness, that which knows. So usually um, when there aren't any, right words, but if I'm describing awareness and I say, I feel a given sensation, that's not it. But if I'm describing awareness and I say something like spaciousness, clear knowing, for example, I'm really just giving you, you're really just giving words to express uh, the nature of awareness as you're experiencing it right here and right now. So I'm not going to go around and force everyone to do this. You can either raise your hand or put it in the chat. So we have from Kathy blank and suspended. Okay, okay, good. So I'll describe it for me. Clear knowing, we have deep stillness from Julie M. Another words, set of words I can use. Radiant presence. That works. We have weightless, sizeless, not separate. So for those of you that are participating, use as many phrases or words as you can to describe this awareness, this presence. So I'm gonna express more an empty knowing, vastness, conscious, yes. Awake awareness. Yeah, we have beyond vast, awake, endless depth. Good, good. You're all doing great. Notice how none of you are describing, um, you're not describing stuff. So that's the difference, right? That's the major difference. You're describing uh you're describing awareness, you're not describing its contents. Yeah, so this is the point of self-inquiry. The reason self-inquiry is done is to clarify just this. So notice how for for awareness, this is not something that needs to be produced. You know, you're not making this happen. This is not something that you're generating. It's just something that you're attending to. It's just something that you're now noticing. So the reason the attention is directed at awareness and self-inquiry is because, generally speaking, our attention is directed outward at objects. It's directed outwards at objects, at characteristics. It's directed at experiences as opposed to um, In this case, we could call it the experiencer, or yeah, there's a sense that this knowing or this inner vastness is that which knows. So mode two is simply meditation. It's resting in or as that which knows. And initially, you have awareness of this. You have this for a few seconds at a time, and gradually this becomes more pronounced and more pronounced. When you begin to um, rest in this or notice this quite frequently, an unwinding of the personality structure begins to occur naturally and all by itself. So you may begin to have the sense, if you were to do this, um, make this your main practice, you may have the sense that the peacefulness of this depth, or the peacefulness of this vastness is not something that your ego or your personality could ever uh, create or maintain. So notice how the awareness, in the same way that you can't stop seeing, like you can't stop the visual field, you also can't stop the presence of awareness. Your mind could become distracted from it, right? Could notice something else, but it's uh yeah, this awareness is not something you're producing. So this one thing of noticing awareness, of attending to awareness, or just being aware, being awareness, this is what produced the initial, the quote, initial awakening that um, happened to me. So I was doing self-inquiry for quite some time, and then I read a sentence from Ramana Maharshi, and then a major falling away of the personality self occurred for 10 days. So that may not, um, something seismic or, big fireworks like that may not happen to you. But what you'll begin to notice in your witnessing, your moments of witnessing, or your moments of abiding in this, is that suddenly you're like, whoa, where's where's the me? Like I'm getting I'm getting moments where my personality self is not perceptible. Huh. Isn't that crazy? Or how strange is that, right? So this is um, the deeper, we could call it the deeper nature, right? If the personality and the ego is on the surface of experience, this is in a way um, a layer that is more fundamental. So from this witnessing and from this vastness, you're able to observe thought and feeling and memory, which is the basis for your personality. So that's why mode two, self-inquiry, and why witnessing is so powerful. in modern psychological terms, it's called metacognition. So beyond cognition or beyond thought. It's the awareness which knows thought, which which observes the arising and passing of of thought and of feeling. So it's not a matter, it's not that if you do this enough, it produces awakening per se. It's that this deeper nature or this, you know, deep vastness, it's already there. It's just that by attending to it, identification gradually shifts to it. Yeah, it's not that meditation produces realization. It's that through meditation, the realization, which is already present and imminent, is then ascertained. It is recognized. That's really what is happening. When uh in a moment of witnessing or in a moment of awareness, you have the sense that the personality is suspended or not perceptible. You really begin to have the sense like, oh, I guess I'm not just what I think and what I feel. And if that opening widens and deepens, there's a great deal of freedom in that. So teachers, I would say, that are best for this um, realization of the witness would be Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta Maharaj. So Nisargadatta calls this the I am. It's that which knows. The I am. And I believe from his teacher, his practice was just to attend as much as possible to this I am, to this I am presence. And to again and again inquire, you know, well, what is it? What is it that knows? And that clarifies this, that questioning clarifies this. But all it really is what everyone has been describing and um, already giving words to here. So so you might have the question, you know, how is this you know, how is this enough? Like, yes, I get this sense, I'm noticing this boundlessness, I'm noticing this vastness, but I'm still me, I'm still here. You know, it's me that is attending. So this is why it's considered this is why it's taken up as a practice. It's taken up as a continued investigation, a continued looking, really. Because initially you have the sense that it's your personality or it's you looking at awareness. And at some point that flips and you have the sense that you're actually awareness looking at you. You're actually the boundless space, the vast depth, and your personality, your thoughts and feelings are just appendages. It's just an appendage. It's just an aspect or a thing that arises. So um, so that shift may be immediate or it may be gradual. But the characteristic is when you when this sense of knowing, this sense of inner space or awareness, presence, you now have the sense that that's what you are. So if someone was going to ask you, what are you? You would point to the most fundamental thing, which would be that spaciousness or that boundlessness. And when there's conviction in that, which is something that Nisargadatta talked about, he said the conviction in the I am, the conviction that you're not thought, that you're not feeling, that you're not what happens, you're that which knows the happening. There's a conviction in that and a power. Yeah, that's when the freedom opens up. Because in this case, when suffering's happening, it's the body that's suffering. It's the body that's suffering, it's feeling that's suffering, it's thought that's suffering, it's memory that's suffering. But this presence is not suffering. Because it knows the suffering, but it is not subject to it. So this is the kind of perception that you begin to have with this form of awakening. It's distinct from the later stages, at least in my case, later stages that I describe. But this is really, yeah. If you've been practicing for a long time and you have the sense that you haven't really, shifted into a deep freedom or shifted into um, something persistent, it, if you're coming from the awakening to reality camp or you're coming from Buddhism, um, it it may be because this no self emptiness thing is just a little too far off the map. It doesn't quite make sense. But this awareness and this witnessing, this awareness being an inner space or just being a space of knowing, this is noticeable for most practitioners. Once it's pointed out, this becomes the base of their practice. So when I met Namkhai Norbu and I asked him, Master, how do I realize the nature of mind? He just like stared into my soul for 2 minutes, didn't say a word. This like big Tibetan guy just looking at me. And it felt like forever. And then he said, how do you feel? And I said, I feel present. And he's like, yeah, okay, now relax. That was it. To notice presence and to relax is the base, is the foundation for everything, everything. So when this awareness gets pointed out, you take it um, as the main thing that you attend to. So same thing with Nisargadatta. He's like, you're not what you think, you're not what you think and feel, you're the I am. Notice the I am. Notice your consciousness. And it doesn't mean you need to be, obsessive about it and, you know, get into this whole thing where you're like constantly trying to attend to it and you like get flustered when you're not aware or whatever. You don't need to take it that far. But the point is to just be as much as you can. I mean, you're already being all the time, right? You're already here all the time. You're present uninterruptedly. Your body is present uninterruptedly. Your stream of thought is present uninterruptedly. All the constituents, all the areas of experience are present uninterruptedly. You know, awareness also uh, is uninterrupted. It's just that the attention on it fluctuates. So you have moments where you're aware, and then moments where you're not, but your consciousness is continuous. That's the nature of the waking state. So you're noticing that which is awake. And when you notice that enough, a shift happens. And when that shift happens, freedom dawns. So it's really that simple for the first, you know, from my last week talk where I talked about unity consciousness. So unity consciousness is a byproduct of this. So when this noticing, this uh this awareness, uh when a sufficient shift to it occurs, you begin to notice how you can't separate your awareness from anything. You can't separate your knowingness from the table. It's like it knows the table, but you also can't find where it begins and where it ends. So this is considered the, fruition of the witness. You begin to have the sense and the direct experience of unity. So this witness, which was the inner space, this awareness, which was localized to this inner boundlessness, this internal dimension, it that um that sense that it's internal flips, or it essentially breaks, and then you have the sense that your heart is arising as everything. You have the sense that your awareness is arising as everything. Your beingness, the signature of beingness, is arising as everything, or everything has that signature. Everything is being. And you really feel that so deeply in your bones. The sounds of the birds and the people talking, you feel that it's all happening within you. And that's really the characteristic mark of unity, that it's all you, it's all happening within you. And not you as a personality, but you as a consciousness. So your personality could be there or not, doesn't even matter at that point. Um, because you see that the your memories, your thoughts, your feelings there. They're just as much as part of the beingness as anything else, as waters and the rivers, and the fire that you're looking at, and conversations that people are having. Yeah. So I call unity consciousness, in specific terms, I am everything. So the I am, which was the subject of inquiry, um, that that sense, that direct sense of I am, is now sensed in everything. So you literally feel like everything's you. Um, and it's at that point that you start to have thoughts like, okay, um, this this is some kind of enlightenment or awakening. Like this is just not what most people how most people live. It's certainly not how I lived most of my life. That's the kind of sense that you get from it. It's like, okay, this is quite different. And the mark of, what form of awakening is the case for you is what you experience when you're aware. So when you're actually noticing and you're aware, what is it that's happening? You know, that becomes your base. And it's still possible to have all the um, personality quirks and especially in the entry to this or in the onset, there's no you don't there may be no falling away of aberrations or of negative patterns necessarily. you know Nisargadatta was a smoker. He remained a smoker for most of his life, right? Yeah, I think he smoked the entirety of his life. So it doesn't necessarily make all your problems go away. And that's something that becomes apparent after the fact. But at every stage, you notice that more freedom opens. You know, the stage after uh, this one that I'm describing is that you become free from identification completely. So that that I am, which is asserting itself on awareness, which is asserting itself on experience. There's a claiming that is happening in a way. And to Nisargadatta, this was the point of conviction, which he found to be necessary. But what I'm saying is that claiming that I am this, I am that, I am awareness, I am boundlessness, that asserting formation and experience or in consciousness, that falls away. So the difference between I am everything and what comes after it is that I am falls off the map, falls off the cliff, and there's just everything. And you might be able to, get a sense for how that would be liberating, more liberating in a way. So the the radical changes to the personality have to do with the depth of the particular kind of awakening that is occurring. So let's say there's different stages or there's different phases or configurations of awakening. So um, the witness, which is the realization of presence, versus unity consciousness, versus no self, where the I am falls off. So you could see each of those three as like different spheres or different kinds of awakening. Um, but within these, as Jeffrey called them, locations, with or calls them within these locations, there's varying degrees of depth. So, for example, even in the realization of the witness, like let's just say you have this deep recognition of the presence, this uh, deep sense of the knowingness, but not necessarily unity. It hasn't become this thing where you know all things that arise are you. That's not happening. But you really you have the sense of this inner spaciousness, and your identification has shifted to that. That that shift into the inner spaciousness could be so deep. It could be so far. Um, could be so it could be so deep that the distance from the personality material in the form of thought and memory is immense. So imagine, with this inner boundlessness and this inner spaciousness, that you start to experience very, very deep stillness, very, very deep silence. And that starts to become, your baseline. You get really, really, really quiet a lot. Yeah. You're getting so quiet. You're getting so quiet that like you're starting to basically forget mm, who you are as a person. Like you're so quiet that that personality is really far back in the background. I mean, you get annoyed or something happens, you get triggered and it comes back up and then it just is way back there again after the fact. The quietness of the I am presence can become so vast that it feels like your personality is just a thought. So that's what I mean by depth. The quietness can become so vast that you're awake while you sleep. You watch your body sleep. You're able to hear yourself snoring as your mind rests in this clear light. That's all possible just from just from that that kind of awakening. So it's not like, you know, I'm not saying that in the awakening to reality map, and generally if you come from Buddhism, they have a classification for what is and what isn't enlightenment, right? Actually, same thing in Vedanta. The Buddhist form of enlightenment is considered fake, and in Buddhism, the Vedantic version of enlightenment is considered fake. But when you look at these experientially, these various locations of awakening, irrespective uh, of how they're mapped or how they're mapped as progression from one location to the next, the depth of each of those segments or each of those locations um, is incredible. So even just from the witness, not even going into unity, just from the witness itself, um, you could have a very, very profound shift and very, just awesome and an incredible freedom open up. Mm. So, what are the conditions generally that support, depth of that measure? To get to the point where you're so quiet that you're aware in your sleep. What do people do to foster that? Yeah. My mentor Tina Rasmussen in her 50s, I think her early 50s, she had money set aside to pay her mortgage in advance for a year, and she didn't talk for a year. She just sat in her apartment 14 hours a day and did dream yoga at night. So she was aware in her dreams every night. Um, Silence is the jet fuel for the continuity of awareness. So for her, after like, a month of being quiet and not talking to anybody, the awareness became pretty continuous. And she said it was during her year in retreat that the big quote, what she calls quote the big shift happened to her. you know, so in my case, the shift happened to me before I did the year-long retreat. So it happened to me as very disorienting, destabilizing. So um, my lease ended at where I was living at, and when I did a 9 month retreat in Thailand. So the timing was actually perfect at that time in my life. I think I was 26 or something like that. Yeah, 25 or 26. So these are the kinds of things that people do. Um, they generally isolate themselves, or they increase their time in meditation. So, and it doesn't, for example, if you have the time, or if you have the freedom, I understand many of us don't, but if you do, it really just requires, like, or not requires, but what really supports it is just not doing the things that capture your attention and make you so distracted. So, if you want to experiment with it, you'd like not talk for 5 days and see what happens, not use your phone for 5 days. Your life could be the same, have breakfast with your husband or wife, but you don't talk for 5 days. And you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how clarified this presence, this knowing can get. And yeah, for those of you that haven't done longer retreats, don't get the impression from me that I'm saying like that's what's required, that you have to like disappear for a year. Not at all. Like, a lot of this happens for people very spontaneously and with minimal hours of practice, even an hour a day or less of doing any of the three modes can cause a major shift. All that needs to be done is that once the shifts or the openings occur, that you orient towards those. So, um, but right, the story that you'll generally hear is, uh, for example, Ajahn Bua, who was a great forest master. He was a monk for 20 years or something at first, and he said by his 20th year he hadn't realized anything, and was not satisfied at all with his career as a meditator. So he decided to just like really, go all out, pedal to the metal, use a mantra meditation technique continuously. And in time, in my opinion, he had a breakthrough and a shift that was way past I am. But that's the kind of uh, um, you tend to hear more of those stories because uh, something that Jeffrey pointed out in his work as well. He found that people that are teachers tend to have um, all the explosive stuff. So they have like the real deep dark night stuff, life of struggle, whatever. It's like it's like the universe needs to create a flower that has a good story to attract bees, so that bees will come to that flower. But most people do not have like a crazy explosive. A lot of people don't have a crazy explosive shift. It just something falls away, and that's it. So an important thing is to not measure what is happening to you um up against someone like myself. That would not be an accurate or skillful way to go about this, because um the design of the teacher is unique in the sense that they almost, I mean, the really good ones are the ones that we can all think of have some kind of element of struggle, and difficulty that they had to overcome. And that's always part of their story and um, what makes that person such a joy to listen to. But for people that aren't teachers, that's not it's not something that you should expect to happen in your case. It's like, oh yeah, Ryan talked about these 10 days of unity and 10 days of unbroken almost unbroken continuous awareness. And that's not a measure of the thing itself. Um, the measure is the shift in identification that occurs. The bliss is not the measure. The moment to moment awareness is that's a measure of um of the clarity, but it's not actually a measure of the realization. You could have moment to moment awareness as a personality, you see. So there's specifics. It's not the degree of uh, happiness or ecstasy. These are all side effects. Like these are all levers that can go up or down, but the measure is how you regard yourself after the fact, during or after the fact. In my case, for 26 years, I was a personality, and then I wasn't. That's the shift. Everything else was just fireworks. Everything else was just side effects, you know? Cosmic bliss, can't sleep, deities appearing at night, all this stuff, that's all side effects. But the teachers have those in those have that kind of stuff in their stories because that's what wows people and amazes them. It's the universe is mysterious like that. But none of those things are necessary. They just tend to happen, but they're not the thing itself. The thing itself is what falls away. In I am and in I am everything, there's a major falling away of the personality. May or may not be complete, but there's a major falling away. In someone's case, like Ramana, they really did not have the sense of being a person at all after the fact. But for many people that enter I am or enter I am everything, they still have a personality. It's just not at the forefront of their experience. So, man, where was I going? The cool thing about like losing your train of thought is basically like free, it's just free presence. It's like spontaneous cessation. So you could, if that's something that happens to you, you could just take it that way. Okay, let's do some questions. A couple questions and then we'll end here for today. Oh, the chat box is full. Wow. Someone asked Ben, I am realization is stream entry. No, absolutely not. Actually, it really depends on who you talk to. Um, for example, in some sects within Theravada, like Ajahn Sumedho, or I think even the Ajahn Bua lineages, they do see this realization of the chitta, this realization of this pure knowing as a stage of awakening. But outside of that, the stream entry thing is tricky. It's a tricky thing. I mean, other people disagree with me and they say, "Oh, it's so clear. It just means the lower five fetters fall away. You have no belief in rites and rituals anymore. You have no conviction in the self anymore. Blah blah blah." Um, but some traditions, Theravada traditions, define stream entry as the attainment of cessation, whereas others do not. So it's kind of like this whole thing. Um, Stream entry is generally defined as the falling away of the five lower fetters of self-view, reliance on or belief that rites and rituals will lead to enlightenment. Um, there's the absence or the loss of doubt in the triple gem, and a couple other things that I can't think of at the moment, but it's definitely, you can look it up. I am everything is not, at least in the Buddhist sense, is not stream entry for the most part. Why? Because there's an I am. So Buddhism stream entry is the falling away of self, and in I am everything, all that exists is self. So that's the difference. Um, yeah. Like I don't know. Some of you are here. You've probably never heard me say this before, so I'm just gonna say it now. Um, I do not take any modern path confirmations as serious or legitimate, period. Because everyone's just fumbling. They're like, well, if it fits the 10 fetter model and you don't have the lower five, you're a stream enter. How do you know you're a stream enter? Like, please. So previously, we had the Buddha around to confirm what stage people are at. And there's so much contention over what constitutes stream entry. Does it require cessation? Does it not require cessation? Blah, blah, blah. Um, I've found that it's just a completely unreliable affair, and that it depends on the teacher. So one teacher will define it as this, another teacher will define it as that. And if you meet those definitions, then that teacher says you're a stream enterer. And I have those path confirmations, and I have rejected them because I don't think any teacher I've met is a Buddha and is able to make those determinations with any level of reliability whatsoever. So yeah, that's my take on it. You can take it or leave it, but I think this particular uh, particular thing with the fixations on the stages, or not that I'm not saying you're fixated, but like it's just been changed so much, especially recently. Like I'm from like classic Theravada. So I do not think that most of these guys, actually, I don't think any of them that claim to be arahants are arahants. Like they're not even close, honestly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's gonna make me sound like I shouldn't say that, like, oh, how do you know, you don't know anything. How do you know who is and who isn't? I ultimately don't, but I'm just saying, like, according to the, how this used to be perceived, or how this used to be regarded for the most part. If you're at the third stage of enlightenment, you never, ever, ever experience lust or anger, period. Bring me a Western or whoever person that claims to be an arhat that doesn't experience lust or anger. I haven't found one. I thought I found a guy, and then he turned, yeah, and then that that ended up not uh, ended up not being an arhat. So that's yeah, that's my take on that. Yeah, there are some teachers, still in Thailand and in different parts of Asia that are, considered arahants. But even then, I'm not really sure. I feel like unless you have clairvoyance or some kind of supernormal ability, you can't really know. Because also it's the case that a teacher, let's say this, like you actually have to live with the teacher or spend enough time with them significantly to actually see if they get mad or see if they have um, more preferences than they present themselves as having. Those things they're not perceivable in the normal student teacher relationship dynamic environment at a retreat center or whatever. Like you actually have to be friends with these people to see. Yeah. So let's see. Question: my only limited frame of reference to date is Monroe stuff. Oh, Robert Monroe. Yeah. Is Mode 2 at all analogous to Focus 10? Um, Robert Monroe's gateway program and material is really about exploration of consciousness, whereas everything that I talked about in this class was in regards to investigation or noticing the nature of consciousness. So in self-inquiry and in meditation, you're looking at consciousness, you're looking at what is happening. Whereas with the Monroe material, you're developing the mind, body, and energy to explore other dimensions. That's really what's happening. So in Focus 10, you develop something called mind awake, body asleep. So that means you develop the capacity to um, have awareness while your body goes into sleep. Um, so that in that in between state, or when you are able to remain in it for even just like a minor period of time, it becomes a launching pad to lucid dreaming or to out of body experience. So it's a bit different. It's like when I mentioned earlier that you can become so quiet or you can become so aware that you can watch your body sleeping. That is a Focus 10 state. Um, but in the Monroe material, that's just used as a launching pad. Like it's not a practice of in itself to just stay in Focus 10 all night, like meditating on your body, sleeping all night. That's not in the Monroe materials. It's just you use Focus 10 because once the body is asleep, the spectrum of consciousness states becomes accessible. So able to enter dreams, able to enter other what Bob calls reality systems. Yeah, different states of consciousness. So for those of you that are new, for the Bob Monroe, Robert Monroe focus levels, he describes them in detail over the course of a couple books: Journeys Out of Body, Far Journeys, and his third book is called Ultimate Journey. And it's really totally different than what's presented as awakening in Vedanta, but what's and in Buddhism for the most part, like with no self and emptiness and all this. But what's very unique about Bob's work is that I haven't found anyone that like maps the levels of consciousness and these other dimensions as well as he has. So they're talked about in different traditions, but he really was just truly exceptional in mapping them. Like he found that, and you know, this we're getting at a point now where like some of you may or may not believe in this kind of stuff, but he found that, for example, in his observations in the out of body state, that most people on Earth will depart from the Earth plane, um, and be basically reborn, or they'll transition to an afterlife destination that fits their religious ideas, religious or spiritual ideas. And these are described in near-death experiences. After some time, they feel that there's more to learn on Earth in the physical dimension, and they incarnate again. So he found that um, people were on Earth for vast periods of time, going through this process between what he calls the belief system territories um, and physically incarnating. And he pointed to some things that were very, I mean, it's possible that he read Buddhism, but with the descriptions that he gave, I don't think that he got this from that. In Buddhism, when you become a stream enterer, or when you enter the first stage of enlightenment, you have 7 more lives until you basically vanish from the cycle of existence. So in the Buddhist teachings, he found that when someone became an arhat and they passed away, you know, they were no longer detectable to him. So usually people ask, you know, when a monk died, like what stage of enlightenment did that monk attain, and what is their destination now, if there is one? So if they were an arhat, they would not have a destination. They would not have a discernible location after death. But if they weren't an arhat, they did. So the Buddha would always say, okay, they've been reborn in this place and whatever, and they were first, second, third stage of enlightenment. He was very open and candid about that. So Buddhism has this thing with 7 lives. From the moment you um, touch nirvana for the first time, touch no self for the first time, you got 7 lives on the wheel till you're gone. And Bob directly observed this. He found that actually the reason that most people or most beings came to be incarnated on Earth at all was to meet what he called a last timer. In other words, a Buddha, a person that was going to undergo their final round of incarnation in this cycle. And his OBEs, they reached a certain point where he was beginning to experience things from outside of linear time. So he'd actually see, you know, these last timers about to take their final incarnation. He said they emanated a light which was unlike anything he saw in any realm throughout the observable universe of out of body experience. Like the purity or the glow that came from these last timers. Um, a person who was going to incarnate for the final time was, he described it as truly magnificent. So yeah, so there's parallels, but they're definitely not I wouldn't say they're the same thing. And especially in the later books, Bob talks more about the higher self, and in his third book, he has his own form of enlightenment, which really made him, mm, yeah, he describes it as like after the fact, you're completely unable to live the way that you lived before. I mean, it's like being plugged out of the matrix and dunked back into it. And he describes it at the end of Ultimate Journeys, what happens to him. He has an experience of blipping out of samsara, or at least what he considered existence to be. And of all the final thing about Bob before we end the class, what I appreciate most about his work was that he came to his own answers and conclusions on the big questions. How did we get here? Why are we here? Where did we come from? Where do we go after death? And is there something beyond all of this? This cycle of time and life and death, is there something beyond it? Did we exist before the cycle? Bob actually answers those questions. And surprisingly, he's becoming much more famous now than he was when he was alive, which is really awesome to see. So, all right, everyone, I'm going to stop the recording now.